Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the first thematic event of our project DIFME. My name is Leonie Baldacchino. I am the director of the Edward de Bono Institute, and we are very pleased to be partners in this Erasmus-funded project. It's a Knowledge Alliances project, together with the Malta Business Bureau, who are coordinating this project, and partners in a number of other countries, as the project manager will inform you in a few minutes' time. A few words about the program that we are planning to follow today. So after my very brief welcome address, Ms. Marika Huber, who is the DIFME project manager, will give you an introduction to the project to explain to you what the project is all about. After that, I will give you a presentation on recognizing external influences. So I will go through a few models and methods related to the recognition of factors in the environment. After that, Dr. Elaine Dutton will tell us all about how to manage external influences from an HR perspective. She will be speaking about how to lead people through change. After that, Professor Sandra Dingley will speak about how to anticipate external influences through open innovation and foresight. Then we will have some time for questions and discussion, whereby we will encourage you to come forward with any questions that you might have related to the topics that we would have discussed. And to do so, you have two options. You may either use the raise hand function so that we can enable your microphone, or if you prefer, you may type your questions into the chat box and Christina will ask your questions on your behalf. After that, we will be welcoming the CEO of the Malta Business Bureau, Mr. Joe Tanti, for some brief concluding remarks. Now, the aim of today's session, the aim of today's event is to, first of all, introduce the project DIFME to those of you who are not yet familiar with it. And it is a part of the piloting and exploitation phase of the project, whereby we have now developed a number of e-learning modules, as Marika will explain. And the theme of today's session is related to the first module. So it is an introductory module. So my presentation will be an overview of some of the models and the methods that are covered in this introductory module with regards to recognizing the external factors that may impact an organization. However, we then thought it would be interesting to go a little bit beyond what is only in the module. Therefore, we have, after recognition of external influences, as I said, Dr. Dutton will explain how these can be managed, and then also taking more of a forward-looking approach through the foresight and open innovation perspectives that Professor Sandra Dingley will share with us. So I hope that this will be an interesting set of presentations that will trigger questions from the audience. So I look forward to discussing what we present with the attendees later on. But now I think it is time to welcome and introduce Ms. Marika Huber, who is the project manager of our project. Thank you, Marika. Over to you.
Thank you, Leonie. Good afternoon, everyone. All about, you can give me a minute. Okay, so DIFME. DIFME has, we kicked off DIFME back in February 2019. It's a 3-year project, which is funded by the European Union. It's a project wherein we are 11 partners from 7 countries that have come together to work on a knowledge alliance. Just to brief you, a knowledge alliance is basically working universities, higher education institutions, and businesses working together to facilitate the flow and co-creation of learning duos. And here we're talking about a long-term partnership of 6 businesses and 5 educational partners from 7 different European countries. It's 11 partners in all. To develop a new and innovative approach, integrating the skills in a curriculum which is adapted to the real needs of the industry, with an e-learning platform being made available. DIFME has been created to identify the existing gaps in entrepreneur skills and to develop fundamental competencies related to financial literacy and digital skills. Our cooperative development has come together basically before starting the development. We conducted a survey among more than 450 entrepreneurs and future business owners to identify the needs of entrepreneurs. And we had interviewed as well 20 experts from the 7 European countries. European countries being Malta, Italy, Greece, Germany, Bulgaria, the Netherlands, and Ireland. We saw the need for a number of topics, and we concluded these into 9 modules. And these were developed by a higher educational institution, the university, and a business partner. So each module was created by a university and a business partner. DIFME gives the option for individual online studying, so one can access the information and study all the materials individually online. There are 9 modules with the theory combined with practicality, exercises and quizzes to test the knowledge. We're still building on this, and we will be also having a number of videos and additional information related to the specific modules, and the workshop and the pilot test. So in all the 7 countries, that is Malta, Bulgaria, Ireland, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and Greece, workshops are being organized for the entrepreneurs to get what they learned in the toolkit in a real working context. Who are the partners? So we have 5 universities: University of West Attica, which is based in Piraeus in Greece; University of National World Economy, Sofia in Bulgaria; TUD, based in Dublin, Ireland; University of Malta, the Edward de Bono Institute for the Design and Development of Thinking; and based in Regensburg, we have the Oyster Bayerisch Technisch. The 6 business partners are Malta's Business Bureau, EDEC, which is based in Piraeus in Greece and works together with the University of West Attica; Incubator Leeuwarden, which is based in northern part of the Netherlands; ESOP, which is our quality partner based in Regensburg; Do Learn Finance, which is Fab Practice based in Cork; and Eurocrea Merchant, which is based in northern Italy. What steps have we taken to this project? Basically, we started off with an in-depth analysis of the programs which are currently being offered by the higher education institutions in Europe and outside Europe, by identifying the gaps in the skills, micro-entrepreneur skills, developing fundamental competencies related to the financial literacy and digital internationalization. The partners then work together to collect and distribute all useful information. The skills have been integrated in a curriculum which is adapted to the real needs of the industry. And the program has combined different learning approaches, as I said, either for the individual or else for the classroom environment as well. Piloting and further in-depth analysis is what we're currently working on in the DIFME project. And we are also working on having an SME hub to assist micro and large entrepreneurs to find ways to internationalize their business. We hope to conclude the project, we will conclude the project with a memorandum of cooperation to further develop a joint program with EU qualification standards. What have we achieved so far? Well, we set measurable indicators, and we have concluded the survey at the start. We targeted 250 entrepreneurs, and we had basically a over 450. The universities researched what curriculums are currently available. The partners each prepared a country report, and the University of Malta, then Leonie had prepared, together with Christina, had prepared a synthesis report for the preparation of the new learning model. We developed the new learning model. We've worked on this, and the translations were effected in all the national languages. We have Italian, we have Greece, we have German, we have Bulgarian, we have Dutch, and for Malta and Ireland, we stuck to English. We have uploaded the toolkit. This was taken care of by EDEC, our Greek partner, and we are in the phase of pilot testing. And we aim to have at least 30 entrepreneurs and students who would like to participate in this pilot testing. We would revise the model related to the feedback we get from the pilot testing. And we are working on the development of the SME Hub. December 2021 will be the end of our project, where we will sign the memorandum of cooperation between the partners, and we will hold our final conference. Thank you very much. If you want to know more about DIFME, please visit the website or contact me at info@difme.eu. I'm showing you a video now just as a recap of what DIFME, the project DIFME, is about and what the modules cover as well.
DIFME, in short, for Digital Internationalization and Financial Literacy Skills for Micro-Entrepreneurs, is an EU-funded project created by 5 EU universities and 6 EU business partners. DIFME is available in 6 languages: English, Italian, Bulgarian, German, Greek, and Dutch. DIFME is based on the feedback of over 450 micro-entrepreneurs to develop learning tools related to financial literacy and digital skills, and is free to anyone who wants to be more entrepreneurial. You may already be in business and interested in acquiring further knowledge. You may be a student interested in making a career from your talents, or maybe you have a number of ideas but are unsure about how to implement them. The DIFME online self-paced course is delivered on demand, meaning that you can access the course at any time. It includes descriptive PowerPoints, informative articles, quizzes, and external links for you to make responsible financial choices and to understand digital techniques readily available to boost your enterprise internationally. You can also refer to the SME Hub, an open repository source of solution, and you can also keep track of your success. At the end of the coursework, your input is acknowledged with a certificate. DIFME is divided into 9 training modules. Modules 1 to 4 are specifically focused on building your understanding of financial literacy. Module 1, Introduction to Business. Module 1 is built around analyzing your organization's macro and micro environment. It will equip you to adapt to changing environments, help you recognize opportunities, and develop competitive advantages. Module 2, Financing the Business. Module 2 will help understand financial calculations and concepts that you will need to communicate with to your lenders and investors. Module 3, Sustaining the Business. Module 3 uses realistic business simulations to help you fine-tune your business and deliver the best sustainable plan. Module 4, Registration, Taxes, and Other Legal Requirements. Module 4 will give you an overall insight to general business types, their legal, fiscal, and financial implications, and how to protect your business trademark and copyright. Module 5 to 9 are focused on building your confidence in digital tools and digital strategy. Module 5, Cybersecurity. Module 5 will ensure you minimize the risks of doing business online and protect your information while staying connected. Module 6, Digital Marketing. Module 6 acknowledges how technology has significantly changed marketing online through mobile phones and other digital mediums. Module 7, Digital Transformation and Strategy. Module 7 will guide you through digital concepts appropriate for your individual business and built to your specific needs. Module 8, Managing Relationships with Customers Online. Module 8 should help you understand the importance, processes, and channels of customer relation management. Module 9, Business Intelligence. Module 9 will introduce techniques and concepts linked to business intelligence systems and explains how to use your data to turn it into actionable information. Find out more and participate in DIFME for free. www.difme.eu.
Right, thank you very much, Marika, for your interesting overview of what we think is an interesting project. We're very pleased to be involved in DIFME. And we're also very pleased that this thematic event that is kicking off all of the thematic events in all the different countries is wrapping up our Global Entrepreneurship Week activities for this year here in Malta. Our students are well familiar with Global Entrepreneurship Week by this time, but for the benefit of those of you who are not familiar with it, just a few words to point out that it is celebrated in over 180 countries all around the world during November. So we are also very pleased to be involved in GEW as an institute and also through this project. I am conscious of time, so I think I need to move on directly to my presentation now. As I mentioned earlier, the focus of my presentation is on recognizing external influences. Now, this is related to the first module of the DIFME project, so it is an introductory module. Therefore, those of you who are more seasoned entrepreneurs or business owners or business managers will probably be familiar with the models that I will be mentioning today. However, it is first of all important for the novice entrepreneurs to learn these tools and apply them in their business strategy and the day-to-day operations of their business. But also for you experienced entrepreneurs, I think it is good to bear in mind that although my first actual slide is about what external influences are, but my next slide after that is about the difference between automatic and deliberate processing. So let's take this one step at a time. So what are external influences? These are those factors that are not within the control of the organization. So any influences that are taking place and are happening in the external environment. Now, the smaller the organization, the newer the organization, the more susceptible it is to the external factors and external shocks, and the more it depends on the external environment for resources. So for any business, in particular for micro entrepreneurs who are the target audience of DIFME, it is very important to understand what these external influences are. Now, of course, at the moment, the greatest external influence is COVID-19, which is, well, practically impossible not to recognize. However, there are also many other external influences which are very often much more subtle and less easy to recognize. However, it is important for entrepreneurs to learn how to recognize all external influences, because otherwise they may end up in a situation where these external factors would lead to the demise of their business. So they need to understand how to recognize them in order to survive and prosper. Now, as I was saying in my previous slide, human beings process information in two distinct modes. First of all, we can process information in the non-conscious or automatic mode. Okay, so whether we are paying it, what this refers to attention or perception or decision-making, or indeed recognition of anything, including of the internal environment, this can take place sometimes automatically, right, without thinking about it, coming from what we call system one. However, we can also make a more deliberate effort and process information more consciously, right? Now, very often, experienced entrepreneurs claim that they are very alert and very intuitive. And therefore, they don't need to carry out extensive systematic analysis, right? Because they can go on their gut feeling, they can notice things very easily. So their recognition of external influences might be a little bit more rapid and a little bit easier than it is for novice entrepreneurs. However, as I was pointing out before, it is quite easy to fall into a trap that we take it for granted that because we have been doing this for a long time, we are experienced and we now kind of know how it is. It's easy for us to recognize. It might actually work against us because that might lead to certain biases, okay, and errors in judgment, errors in thinking, and we might end up either making the wrong decisions or missing a particular change in the environment or missing an opportunity and so on. So my point earlier was that these frameworks that I will be introducing in my next few slides, which are taken and adapted from the first module of DIFME, are very important for early stage entrepreneurs to be familiar with so that they can engage in a deliberate, systematic analysis of the environment. But those of you who are more experienced might need to remind themselves that every now and again, it is also important to use frameworks to complement their alertness and intuition. So it's not a matter of either or, right? But it's a matter of being cognitively versatile and trying to make the most of the two systems, the two modes of processing that we have at our disposal. So the first model that I would like to go through very quickly, because I'm conscious of time, so bear with me if I rush this a little bit too much, is the SWOT analysis. And this enables us to recognize and understand strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So the strengths and weaknesses are related to the internal context of an organization, and they are within the organization's control. On the other hand, opportunities and threats are outside of the organization and therefore not within the organization's control. However, recognizing both the internal factors and the external factors is important for strategic purposes. First of all, recognizing your company's strengths will enable you to use them to your advantage. If you are not aware of what your company's strengths are, how you perform better than your competition, then you might miss important opportunities for improvement. Second of all, recognizing your company's weaknesses will enable you to understand where you need to start to improve. Okay, so it can provide a starting point for improvement. Next, you need to also recognize favorable opportunities that are in the external environment. So although they are not within your direct control, you can adapt what you do in order to exploit external opportunities because they may enable you to expand your business, improve performance, increase profits, and so on. And last but not least, you need to recognize external threats because if you do not do so, you will not be able to mitigate their negative impact. Okay, so the SWOT analysis is an important exercise for organizations to carry out on a quite a regular basis, I would say. Now we have come up with a few questions that the entrepreneur can ask themselves when carrying out a SWOT analysis. So in assessing your company's strengths, you may ask yourself, what does your company excel in? How is your organization unique or innovative? And by innovative, I always like to clarify that being innovative is when you are different from but also better than the competition. So it's not about simply being different for the sake of it, but also adding value. And in fact, that is the next question. How are you adding value to your to your customers? For example, are you offering cheaper products? Are you offering better quality? Are you offering personalized service, quicker delivery? And the list can go on and on. Next, you need to assess your company's weaknesses, and to do so, you may ask yourself also a few questions, including, what does your company perform poorly in? Can you identify any inefficient processes or policies? how are your offerings inferior to those of your competitors? For example, are you offering more expensive products or services, poorer quality, slower delivery times, and so on? Next, you look at your external opportunities and threats and ask yourselves a few questions. When assessing external opportunities, you could ask yourself, can you add any new services or products to your existing market offerings? Can you enter any new markets with your current products or services? Have any new suppliers entered, and can they offer their supplies at a cheaper price? Is the government offering any subsidies or grants that you could use? And this reminds me of a series of webinars that we recently had on the ecosystem for entrepreneurship in Malta, where we had speakers from different entities outlining all the support measures and grants that are currently available. So these are all sources of potential opportunities. When assessing threats, you may ask yourself, are new competitors threatening your business? Are other external changes, such as political, economic, social, technological, or legal factors affecting your business? And on this note, I'm moving on to the next model, which answers exactly this last question on the threats, the Pestel Analysis. This provides a framework in which one can recognize and, of course, then understand the political environment, the economic environment, the socio-cultural environment, the technological environment, the ecological environment, so the natural environment, and also the legal environment. Now, the short form of this tool is the PEST, but is sometimes extended to include the L, all right, the EL. For the purpose of this presentation, because I am conscious of time and because most small businesses limit themselves to the PEST and integrate the EL within the PEST, I will only focus on those four. So the political and economic factors can be assessed by asking the following questions. So for assessing the political factors, you may ask yourself, is the political environment stable? Do local policies favor and support entrepreneurship? Now, this might be a little bit difficult to assess, especially if you are planning to carry out business in a foreign country. Now, bear in mind that the DIFME modules were designed with the aim of digital internationalization, right? So some of these questions are encouraging entrepreneurs to think about not only their own local context, their own country, but also contexts overseas. Now, if you are not familiar with a particular political context, you may look at reports that are available online, such as the Ease of Doing Business rankings by the World Bank. When assessing the economic factors, you may ask yourself, what is the average interest rate, for example? What is the rate of inflation? What is the average household budget? What is the disposable income? What is the value of the local currency? And so on. Next, you can then ask yourself questions to assess the socio-cultural factors or environment, whereby some questions include what are the demographic trends, what are the traditions of the country and how may they impact my business? What are the working days and hours of businesses in this country? What will be expected of me as an employer? Then, when you assess the technological factors, you may ask yourself, what technologies are trending and which are obsolete? What is the technological infrastructure like in this country that you are considering? What percentage of the population uses the internet? And does the country invest in scientific research and development? Okay, so these are all valid questions to ask when carrying out a PEST analysis. The last model I would like to briefly outline is Porter's 5 forces, and this is used in order to recognize and understand the competition, which of course is a very important external influence. So according to this model, one must analyze the competition through 5 core factors: threat of new entrants, threat of substitute products, bargaining power of buyers, bargaining power of suppliers, and rivalry among existing competitors. Now, once again, we have developed a number of questions to enable the entrepreneur to carry out this Porter's 5 forces analysis. So in order to understand the threat of new entrants, you may ask yourself, are there any barriers to market entry? Are there laws which make it difficult for new companies to enter the market? Is the initial investment needed to enter the market high? Are consumers very loyal to established brands? To understand the threat of substitute products, which are any product that would serve the same or a similar need to what your consumers are getting from you. So it doesn't have to be direct competition. It could also be indirect competition. Okay, so anything that the buyer can essentially utilize in order to satisfy a particular need instead of using your product. So to understand this threat of substitute products, you may ask yourself, are there many substitute products available on the market? Are these substitute products similar to your offering, or is there clear differentiation? Are these products cheaper than your offering? Is it easy and inexpensive for customers to switch to these substitute products? Next, you would need to understand the bargaining power of buyers and suppliers. To understand the former, you can ask yourself, how many customers are there in your country? How many purchase the product or service that you are offering? What is the size of each customer's order? Are they sensitive towards price changes? Next, to understand the bargaining power of suppliers, you may ask yourself, how many suppliers are there in the market? Do they work together to fix prices of supplies? Are the products or services offered by suppliers unique, or are they offering similar supplies? And also very important, is it easy and expensive for you as an entrepreneur to substitute as a supplier, or are you tied to a particular one? Last but not least, in Porter's 5 forces analysis, you need to understand the rivalry among existing competitors. Now, certain contexts are extremely competitive, others are not. Now, from past research, a small island context like Malta is in general very highly competitive. However, this may then vary from one sector, from one industry to the other. So you need to carry out this analysis to understand the competitiveness of the industry that you are in. What questions can you ask yourself? For example, are there many competitors of similar size and power? Is it easy and inexpensive for buyers and consumers to switch to what your competitors are offering? Are the barriers to exit for existing competitors high or low? Now, this is interesting to consider because sometimes a company may be reluctant to leave an industry when there are high barriers to exit, even if they are not making very high profits, for example, right? So if there is anything that is going to keep them from leaving the industry, so if leaving is going to be more costly than staying, then that is going to increase the rivalry amongst existing competition. And on that note, I would like to conclude with a few reflections on, so bringing me back to what I was saying in my introduction. So first of all, I openly admit that recognizing external influences is only the first step in dealing with change. But this is an important source of entrepreneurial opportunities. So recognition of external influences is important, both to enable the organization to survive through certain external shocks, okay, COVID or non-COVID. Whatever changes in the environment are taking place, they may have a negative impact on the organization, but they may also be a source for new opportunities, right? However, we also need to bear in mind that practice makes perfect, and deliberate analysis leads to internalization and alertness. So again, what I said in the beginning was that experienced entrepreneurs tend to rely on their intuition and are naturally more alert. They have learned to be more in tune to the changes in their environment and to these external influences. However, it is still worth practicing using certain established models, including the ones I mentioned, and there are many others, in order to always further internalize these processes so that when one does them automatically, one does them more correctly rather than through biases and errors in judgment. And that's all from me. I thank you very much for listening, and I would like to invite you after the webinar to visit our SME Hub and our e-learning platform. I would now like to introduce straight away our next speaker, Dr. Elaine Dutton, who is the Head of Human Resources and Employment Advisory Services at CSB Group. Elaine, thank you very much for joining us. I will stop sharing my screen so that you may share yours.
Excellent. Good afternoon, everyone. Just give me a couple of seconds so that I can take you through my presentation. There we go. I was still fixing and editing into it, so hopefully it's okay now, though. Anyone who would like to receive this presentation, I don't mind sharing as well. So, and at the end, I'm also putting in some references, being the academician, I can't say it. The academic in me doesn't allow me, of course, to not put in some references and some research there. So it's there for you, for anyone who wants to read more into it afterwards. So I'm a bit conscious of time as well, so I'll try to go through this. Hopefully, maybe in 15 minutes, I should be able to go through it. So essentially, I represent CSB Group. CSB Group is born out of a Maltese entrepreneurial family. Started off with Mr. Zammit, who is now the chairman, and his son leads the business. It is a corporate services provider, or at least it started as a corporate service provider, but we're now also offering real estate, administered offices, recruitment, and various consultancy services for businesses. We do, our customers are mainly international, however, we do serve also a very wide array of businesses locally as well, such as payroll services, HR services, and this is also the area that I am representing. So today I'm going to be discussing mainly about leading people through change. Obviously, external influences usually sort of face organizations with change, could be positive. However, any change in reality, whether positive or negative, sometimes is met with a little bit of resistance, and sometimes people are not as looking forward as one might expect either. So whereas the business owner or the entrepreneur might think that, you know, this is a great opportunity, for example, the employees on board might feel less inclined to, you know, to change whatever is necessary. Of course, some changes might be a little bit more negative, and then explaining those and helping people adjust through such changes would be even harder. So this is what I'm going to take you through today in my presentation. So what about our reactions to change? I mean, back in Greek times, Heraclitus said that change is the only constant. However, at the same time, we do hear people saying that man is largely a creature of habits. So what is it, right? Sort of, if we know that change is so constant, why do we find change so hard? Think about it. I mean, even sometimes adjusting your alarm clock to go off, say, an hour before, sometimes fills us with dread, even facing something like jet lag, you know? So why is it that changing even by just a little bit is hard? Think about, for example, trying to diminish the amount of sugar in your coffee. Sounds almost like nothing, and yet we find it so hard to adjust to these changes. So imagine then if you're adopting a completely new service or adopting a new way of doing things in your business, and then we wonder why the employees are finding it so hard to adjust. There is a little bit of an evolutionary also path through this as well. So on one hand, the changes we've experienced through our evolution have pushed us to be where we are today. Leonie was mentioning, for example, how sometimes certain changes are opportunities, could these changes that have led now that companies have gone through maybe make a difference to what they are offering? Think about it. I mean, probably human beings have only managed to also improve on certain things because of changes in the environment, because the environment has become maybe less predictable from a temperature point of view. Maybe there are better sales in air conditioning units. You can think anything you want, anything which is out there, which is changing, could actually bring opportunities for the business to really benefit from. And yet, from a physiological point of view, human beings are not really very well equipped to make these changes. We hear of the word homeostasis, for example, this idea of keeping in balance. And largely, it is also due to the way our brains are wired. So I'll take you through some research that has taken place. So basically, the reason why you're seeing a snake there and a snake under a stone. So essentially, there's been some research, experimental research, which has basically looked at people playing a game online, whereby they have to turn around stones, and there's either a snake or not under the stone. That in itself might not be an issue, except for the fact that whenever you find a snake, you would be given an electric shock. So obviously, people were trying to avoid this aversive stimulus. Obviously, nobody wants to receive this electric shock, and people were getting pretty stressed out, right? So these people who were the participants who were playing couldn't know whether the stone they were turning had a snake under it or not. Why am I going through this? So essentially, this research found that people tend to find uncertainty of a potential negative event even more stressful than the knowledge that something bad is definitely going to happen. This experiment was really, really well done. So from an academic point of view, hats off, because they really try to manipulate the level of stress that people would actually succumb to. Because on one hand, sometimes people could basically predict where the snake would be, and then at times people could not predict where the snake would be. And the level of stress being measured from a physiological point of view, such as their cortisol levels, for example, in their saliva, etc., could really help researchers mark to the point which people could either predict or not. So basically, the more we can predict something is going to happen, the less stressful we feel, the more out of control we feel. So the more, if odds are basically at 50-50, which is obviously the most uncontrollable they can be, then the more stressed we feel. So stress tends to peak when odds are at 50-50. Think about this. If you are in traffic, okay, and someone is waiting for you, you've got a really important meeting. If all of Malta struck a block, think about when, for example, the bridge in Marsa, for example, was, I don't know, something collided in the bridge in Marsa, I recall, but I just recall of this incident because I happened to be in traffic and someone told me that all of Malta was stuck in traffic. That's a situation which is not really a 50-50 of whether you're going to get to work on time or not. You know you're not going to get to work on time. That in itself doesn't make it so stressful because everyone knows about it. The stress, the situation in itself is so obvious. It's negative, but I mean, you know, you have to suck it basically because you're there and you can't really do anything about it. But imagine at those times where you might make it, but you're not sure. It's really sort of, you know, you're looking at your watch. You're sometimes in bumper to bumper traffic, and then suddenly the lights go green, and you're like, okay, you're moving again. You tend to feel even more stressful than when you're in chock-a-block traffic. So this is the situation, this uncertainty of whether something will happen or not. Will I make it? Will I not make it? Should I call? Should I not call? These are the moments that people tend to feel more stressful about. And while some stress is okay, so you do want employees, you do want a business to run on a level of stress. It keeps you alert, keeps people from doing mistakes. However, if it is long-term stress, it can lead to burnout. If people are so constantly uncertain of what will happen, especially if it's about themselves personally, will I have a job tomorrow or not? That is not conducive to performance or to productivity. In reality, what happens, and we know this, you know, in working environments, if there is something which is uncertain, people will basically focus on that. They will gossip about it in the kitchen. It's what they will chat about on Slack or on whatever medium they've got at the office, you know, because they cannot remove it from their mind. It's the immediate threats immediately in front of them, just like that snake that will then give them that electric shock. And this is basically how we are wired even in our brains. So not to confuse anyone, basically, this is the brain. This is like a slice of your brain, okay, in cross-section. That part which looks like a cross-section of a cauliflower, that is the part towards the back of your neck, okay? So this part is the back of your neck, whereas the frontal part, so your eyes would be basically where there's written VTA, okay? So this is the frontal part. Where you're seeing frontal cortex, in fact, is the rational part of the brain, is the part of the brain which develops later. Babies don't have much in their frontal cortex yet, they're still building it. And yet from a biological, from a kind of, from a rudimentary brain point of view, they're fully developed. So the part that makes them cry, the part that where they feel pain or anticipate a negative stimulus, I can assure you that an 11-month-old knows already when he's at the doctor's office about to receive a vaccine. So that's not the frontal cortex. That's really how brains are wired to recognize negative stimuli. And this is also what happens when we're about to face uncertainty or something which might happen and can affect us negatively. The part which is labeled as the striatum, basically that throws into the body a level of hormones, so these chemicals, which make the body react in a particular way. And usually it is to make the body act. Hey, look, there's something in your environment which you should be alerted to, okay? It also sends signals to the amygdala, which again is the primordial part of the brain where it's really getting us geared to fight or to flight, so to flee or to fight whatever stimulus is in front of us. So you can imagine that with all of this, this basically hijacks the frontal part of the brain. You're not really able to reason much. Think about whenever you're in a situation where where people say, for example, I've become blinded with rage, right? So this is the part where our parts of the brain become so inundated with this level of hormones and chemicals, not really thinking straight. And this is also what people go through in organizations when there is this high level of uncertainty. Now, it obviously depends what we're about to communicate in terms of change. Maybe some things are easier to adapt to than others. Maybe opening for an extra half an hour every day, if you're, say, operating a shop, might be met with resistance, but it's something which people maybe might easily adapt to over time. However, if you tell people that you're suddenly moving part of your operation somewhere else and that is making half of the company redundant, that obviously is a much larger change, and obviously would have to be communicated much more carefully. And this is what I'm going to basically go through in the final part of my presentation, basically some strategies on how to communicate change and how to lead people through that change. Now, I hate reinventing the wheel. So I found a really good article, which I invite you to read. It's by Moscanter. It was published on the Harvard Business Review. And I can tell you from experience that there was nothing in this author's strategies that I would not have done myself. Some years ago, I was part of this small iGaming company. We basically started part of the recruitment from scratch. So I was part of building this company, but then literally over 1 year, we built the company and then dismantled the company. And I can tell you that it's a huge amount of change that you need to go through, both in terms of growth and also in terms of redundancy. However, I feel that from the feedback we got from the employees themselves, everyone told us that we handled it really well. By we, I mean the people managing the organization. And I can tell you that some of these strategies mentioned in this article, I tick them off. I tick them off all myself. So these are strategies I really feel that I can stay behind. So the first one is address the loss of control. So when people experience change, any aspect of change, it interferes with their sense of autonomy, and it can make people feel like they're losing control, especially if the change is being brought on or coordinated by someone else. Usually, if you're the head of the organization, for example, you know what to expect because you're the one leading the change. And yet the people around you don't know as much as you do, of course. Now, I always believe that there's a level of transparency that should go to employees. There are some things which obviously you cannot tell your employees or even your managers sometimes. There are some things which are just too confidential to reveal, which is okay. It's just that we have to be aware that basically people hate losing control. People enjoy having a degree of control over their life, okay, especially over their livelihood. So think about this. Whenever you're going to make a change, as small as it might be, think about this level of control. Is there something that you can do, maybe that you can involve people so that they don't feel as out of control, right? And that they feel part of this change. Maybe explain what the situation is. So if you explain, for example, that, look, guys, we've just suddenly become aware of a new competitor out there in the market, and they are competing for our same clients, and they've got a product very similar to ours. Suddenly, the moment you present the situation, they are themselves realizing that you need to do something about it. You've just brought them on board of the situation rather than just explain to them what you're going to do. And this is, for example, how you can start getting them involved rather than just feeling that they are out of control. Reducing the uncertainty. People hate feeling like they are blindfolded and just, as if they're going to jump off a cliff. In fact, people often say it's better the devil you know than the devil you don't. And you sometimes wonder, but why do people want to stay, for example, in a situation which is ultimately bad, when this could be, for example, better? And this is partly it. People, if they don't realize, if they are not behind the idea of change, if they don't believe in the vision you've got, they will unlikely join you. So first of all, you would need to go through a bit of a PR exercise of selling the change, right? Why is it better to change? What is it in for them ultimately? If we're changing the processes, for example, can you explain it in a step-by-step fashion so that they feel that they can wrap their head around it, right? Could we have clear timetables? So, for example, when I mentioned that we had to make people redundant, we actually explained to people the process through which people will be basically made redundant and for how long and how many more months are left before we actually close the doors to the business. We explained to people that it would not be overnight, but that the first person made redundant would leave the business within a month. People were spoken to. Something to hold on to. The more clear the information, the better. Avoid surprises. Now, it's easier to say to avoid a surprise because sometimes you are yourself already being surprised by something which has just happened. So to what degree could you help maybe avoid the surprises for your employees? I would say the more you can prepare and plan, the better. Right? So if you can try to tell them as many things as possible today in preparation for something that will happen in a week's time, it's better than just surprising them and say, hello everyone, by tomorrow we're going to be operating differently. People need time to adjust. Sometimes that's why we have the phrase to sleep over it, right? People need that time to adjust to something that will happen. And usually they do come around. So as much as possible, avoid the surprise. Rather than just springing something upon people immediately, give them something, especially if it's something that you can maybe explain today, explain what is going to happen, and then re-explain it tomorrow and reduce the uncertainty, okay? Even if you don't have all the decision made up. Sometimes what I see from businesses is that you're waiting for perfection, you're waiting for stars to align in order to maybe then make this big announcement about everything that is going to change. And yet then that means that you're going to delay it so much that people just find the change straight in front of them. And that scares people a lot. So it's better maybe sometimes to give people an explanation. Look, we're monitoring the market. It looks like things are changing. We're not sure how much is going to change, but we're waiting for this to happen. That gives people a feeling that, okay, then it's there. I think Leonie mentioned at one point, don't just be different for the sake of being different. And this is a similar point. Don't change just for the sake of change, especially if you're making a lot of changes at one go, because people then cannot concentrate, people cannot focus. So you really have to help people kind of focus on what is really important and what is in front of them, right? Especially if there is change happening, people need to look up to someone who will give them direction. Tell us what we need to do. Okay, so if suddenly you're changing one thing here and another thing there and thinking of competitors at the same time, this will just disrupt your business. So if there are things which can wait, then let them wait and deal with what is really important and essential to change at this point in time. It is important to help people maintain dignity, right? So especially if they're, for example, imagine you're a new general manager in a business. And people had taken a different direction before, there is no benefit that comes from making the previous administration look bad. So bring people on board, help people maintain their dignity, because people might already be thinking that they're going to be perceived negatively because maybe they were part of a different direction before. And if possible, celebrate those parts of the past which are worth honoring. So you can say things like, I understand that in the past this made sense based on the environment that the company was working through. However, at the moment, this is a better way of moving, for example, or research is now showing that this is a better direction. There is no need basically to make people feel bad because they were part of a previous administration. Address concerns about competence. The one thing that people will probably ask is whether their skill is still going to be relevant. So will I still be relevant with this new change? Okay, so you're bringing in this technology, but I used to do this before. Can I work with this? Is this something that I can learn? So when you're communicating change for these, for things which could affect people's skill, for example, think about training. So in your message of change, immediately inform people that they will be trained, for example, or that they will be mentors. Or if you're going, for example, to be changing your system, maybe try to have two systems running simultaneously at first for people to be able to adjust, and then remove the old system to keep the new. Whatever you can do to help people feel more in control, more competent, less worried, then go for it, right? Because it will help you to basically get there faster at the end of the day. Finally, I think we've got a final 2 slides left. Recognize that change is indeed more work. So especially for those people involved in the change, whatever you're going to be doing, think about also maybe helping those people focus only on that rather than also doing the previous job whilst operating on the change. And also think of their families. For example, one thing that we did when we were going through the changes back at EEL, when I was mentioning this gaming company I was helping to dismantle at the end, people in our director at one point, he told us, invite your partners for dinner on Saturday. I'm taking you all out for dinner. And it was something which I felt was a nice touch, that the director did not just think of us who were working. I mean, at some point, I think we were working about 70 hours a week trying to get everything done, but that our partners had basically missed us. Children had missed their mothers or their fathers. So the director thought of inviting also the family members, in this case, to thank them for the work done. Obviously, you can't just do this maybe for the whole company, but if there are key people who are helping you to make this change happen, don't just think of them, but also think of their families. And this could be something which also improves on your employer branding. Think of the ripple effects. I always say that especially if you've got a small enterprise, it's like you're really throwing a pebble into the pond, right? The smaller the pond, sometimes, especially if it's a big pebble, it could actually disrupt a lot of your ecosystem within your environment. So think a little bit, don't just think of your immediate people, think beyond that. So your stakeholders, your clients, if you're going to change, how is it going to affect everyone around your business? So that you avoid getting that resistance from places where you might not have planned before. This is the final slide, that sometimes the threat is real and then sometimes the threat is really bad. And as I said, sometimes change is resisted because it can hurt, like when people lose their job or people lose their investments. So it's one thing that we're just changing, for example, a payroll system, and people are annoyed because they have to learn a new system and it's, you know, it's inconvenient, it's at the end of the year, I had my leave planned, that's one thing. But then imagine when you're presenting them with change whereby you're telling them that they've been made redundant and they don't have a job in a week's time. So sometimes threats are real and people resist them because of that reason. What I can tell you from experience is that there is no amount of planning which is enough. Plan where your resistance might be coming from, plan who might be the people who will find change the hardest. Could you add a sweetener to it? So are there any bonuses that you can give until the change is superseded? Can you sell the change? Is there something which can be better as an opportunity? Now, obviously, there isn't something to sell about people losing their job, but is there something you can do? Can you write a very good reference letter? Can you get recruitment agencies on board who will come always free of charge to help people find their job? Because obviously the recruitment agencies then benefit from placing the people, so you don't have to pay anything. But these are just some things which would cost you nothing, and yet it would make the people on board feel that you are taking care of them. So even as bad as the change might be, there could still be something that you can do to make it a little bit better. From a communications point of view, be honest, transparent, fast, and fair. There is nothing that you're going to say which is going to make it sound fantastic. It isn't. But it's better if it's just, you know, dealt with and given, rather than, you know, it's like when you're removing a band-aid. If you're going to be doing it slowly, it's going to hurt even more. So just say what you need to say, be as transparent as you can, as honest and fair as you can, and don't just think of the people losing their job, for example, in the case of really bad threats, but also on those people surviving the cut. Final thing I will say is that being human whenever you can go a long way. And I think this applies to any type of change you're going to do. If you're just thinking about redundancies, which obviously from an employment point of view, from an employee's point of view, it's probably the hardest change to deal with. I'm giving you an article which I've recently written and which goes through some of these things I've mentioned in a little bit more detail. But even if the change is not as drastic, think about what I've mentioned in terms of how the brain tackles change, how people can be suddenly flooded with these hormones that tell them, you know, to panic and to react negatively. And think about that when you're going to communicate. Think how you can make it transparent, but fair and honest, and explain things step by step so that people feel in control and know what is going to happen next. And that hopefully gives people the ability to come with you for the change and be less resistant. So that's it from my end. I'm sorry if I maybe took a little bit more time. These are your references and some areas for future reading. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elaine. A very interesting presentation. Your psychology background comes through very clearly, but also your extensive experience in industry and in the business world. So well done on a very interesting presentation. And on this note, I would like to welcome and introduce my dear colleague, Professor Sandra Dingley, from the Edward de Bono Institute. I'm conscious of time again, so I will be quiet and let you get on with it.
Good afternoon, everybody. Some of you may have watched the movie Who Moved My Cheese or read the book by Dr. Spencer Johnson with the same title. It's a business classic with some very interesting lessons about looking towards the future and adapting to change. For those who might not know, the story is about 4 characters, 2 mice and 2 men, who live in a maze and who all love cheese. One fine day, the cheese simply disappears. The mice react by enthusiastically heading out into the maze to find new cheese. The 2 men, on the other hand, feel betrayed and begin to complain to each other. All they really do is waste time hoping the cheese will return. After some time, one of the men realizes that there's no way that the old cheese will return, so he sets out into the maze to look for new cheese. He writes messages on the walls of the maze, hoping that the other person will follow him. He finally discovers new cheese. However, his friend does not follow him and continues to wait for the cheese without taking any action. In both the book and the movie, cheese is a metaphor for what you want to have in life, what you strive for. And this could be anything ranging from the personal, social, professional, or organizational level. So I'd like you all to reflect for a moment. How do you think the world will be in the future, say in 20 or 30 years' time? What are your hopes, your dreams, your visions for the future of your career, your profession, your enterprise, your society, your environment? What does the cheese translate into for you? Is it a better job, or could it be an efficient and successful startup? Perhaps better skills like increased creativity, leadership, entrepreneurial, or communication skills. So this brings me to my key message. We are living at a time when change is exponential. Things constantly change, so we must adapt. The faster we adapt to change, also as Elaine has just said, the more satisfied and successful we will be. We'll now link this to the two topics which are the main theme of my presentation, foresight and open innovation, and we start with foresight. What is foresight and how does it link to all this? Foresight involves the creation of medium to long-term future visions and scenarios. Although some might ask, why should we look to the future when the future is so uncertain? My reply is, do we prefer to be reactive and simply let ourselves be driven by external influences and forces like reeds in the wind, or should we be proactive, anticipating and preparing ourselves for future external influences? I'm sure you will admit it's through present day decisions that we become capable of constructing a better future. The application of foresight allows us to design, create, and work towards our own scenarios and visions in an attempt to act now, either to arrive at a desirable future or to mitigate unfavorable circumstances. Nothing ever remains the same, and there are four potential or possible future scenarios. Things will get progressively better, things will get progressively worse, things will get radically worse, which is a disaster scenario, or things will get radically better, a paradigm shift. But nothing ever remains the same over a period of time. This is something that even corporate foresight should recognize, and corporate foresight may arise from two motives: reactive or proactive. In reactive corporate foresight, it's done in response to current or anticipated future external or internal influences, whereas proactive involves better coping with uncertainties in the business environment, injecting new ideas to make the enterprise more innovative, and instilling a culture where all stakeholders are open to change, anticipate it, and recognize the opportunities that change presents. Foresight activities allow for focus on anticipatory intelligence, early warning systems, direction setting, and strategy formulation. At some stage, however, you might be wondering and asking, how can this be done? I've mentioned some theory, some aspects so far, but in practical terms, what does it involve? The first step involves establishing a topic and a time frame. such as our enterprise in 2040 or our enterprise in 2050. Why 2040 or 2050? Setting a distant timeline allows for the possibility of discarding any possible current constraints, such as the lack of resources, technology, or qualified personnel. The next step involves research, where the questions to be asked include: have any foresight activities been conducted on topics which are similar to or related to our enterprise's service or product? What information is available on the future of our service, product, or industry? This step facilitates the emergence of a number of indicators or pointers which establish a baseline on which the rest of the exercise is constructed. The third step involves identifying specific stakeholders who are the key people involved in our industry, including, for example, key suppliers, clients, lead users, partners, policymakers, etc. A relatively simple foresight exercise would involve designing a number of key questions, some of which would be based on the research conducted, and using these questions to interview each stakeholder to elicit their views on the future of the enterprise, the product, or the service, depending on the focus which has been adapted. The data collected would then be analyzed, with future scenarios emerging, some of which may appear to be more desirable than others, although it's important to say that some outlying options may also be of interest, as they could incorporate increased possibilities for innovation. A strategy or roadmap would then be formulated to lead the enterprise towards the selected and generally the more desired scenario. So this is a simple example of a foresight activity. An enterprise may conduct a foresight activity similar to the one I've just described, or engage a consultant who would have more complex methods in his or her toolbox to do so. However, it's also desirable for the enterprise to simultaneously practice open innovation. And that brings up the question, what is open innovation and how is it linked to foresight? Enterprises that practice open innovation do not only rely on their own internal knowledge, resources, or expertise for the innovation of product, services, processes, or business models, they are aware that useful ideas may be gleaned from external sources such as customers, suppliers, partners, competitors, lead users, researchers, or the general public. Open innovation could also be outsourced to companies that act as innovation brokers. And what these companies do is communicate innovation challenges to a vast network of subscribers, thereby opening challenges up to a large problem-solving network. Now, to go back to what I had said about foresight, you may remember that I mentioned the identification of key stakeholders as part of a foresight activity. Each of the stakeholders mentioned, customers, suppliers, partners, competitors, lead users, researchers, or the general public, are useful sources for new ideas. Establishing collaborative relationships with key stakeholders enables enterprises to garner relevant information that acts as anticipatory intelligence used to counteract external influences. One example, collaboration with suppliers. This allows for the transfer of knowledge whereby suppliers may inform customers of new possibilities that may be launched onto the market. Through effective and open communication practices, suppliers' innovation potential may be unleashed due to awareness of the needs of customers, and this works towards the satisfaction of those needs through the establishment of a trustful and collaborative relationship. The result, a win-win situation with increased business opportunities. An enterprise that takes innovation seriously should consider adopting open innovation practices and conducting regular foresight activities. And this is one way to look at the future with confidence and to embrace change. Enterprises that adopt the attitude that all is well and good as it is risk losing their grip on where they would like to be in the future. Now, remember the mice and the cheese in the maze? Here are some lessons which relate to that story and also to what I've just said about foresight and open innovation. The first one, anticipate change. Get ready for the cheese to move. What does that mean? Enterprises that conduct foresight activities expect things to change. They are well prepared when change occurs and adapt accordingly. Looking towards the future and collaborating with external sources allows for the constant updating of an enterprise's activities in order to meet customer demands and expectations. The second one, monitor change. Smell the cheese often, so you know when it's getting old. This translates into review the enterprise's strategy and build flexibility into it. Pay attention to any anticipatory intelligence you may garner as a result of foresight and open innovation. Read, collaborate, and network. Keep up to date with what is happening. The third one, adapt to change. The quicker you let go of old cheese, the sooner you can enjoy new cheese. These are all quotations from the movie and the book. This means some things happen that are difficult or impossible to change. The current pandemic is one example of this. Simply waiting for the problem to go away will not get anyone anywhere. Learning to adapt to change allows for the recognition of opportunities that may lead to increased innovation. And finally, enjoy change. Enjoy the taste of new cheese. The adoption of open innovation strategies and action taken following a foresight activity allow for new directions to be pursued and for the embracing of change and of everything it brings in its wake. Enjoy the new challenges and opportunities that change brings with it. To conclude, I would like to relate another brief story about the fate of the Eastman Kodak Company, which was set up by George Eastman, who was a school dropout. He certainly had foresight, but, and a big but. Although 75, long before the digital age, a decision was taken to hold back due to the fear that its very profitable film business would be hurt as a result. Some of you may remember the time when customers bought film, loaded it into their camera, and later paid for it to be developed. It was a very expensive process compared to how we generally use digital cameras today. What happened to Kodak demonstrates resistance to change, an insular corporate culture, and a lack of foresight. When Kodak eventually decided to join the digital technology business, it was too late. Kodak ended up as a follower rather than a leader in a business it had actually invented, digital photography. Kodak's mistakes involved ignoring digital technology in the hope that it would eventually just go away. Now, does that remind you of something I said towards the start of my presentation today? By ignoring the potential commercial applications of digital photography and hoping it would simply go away, Kodak acted just like the men in Spencer Johnson's story, Who Moved My Cheese? So, can we smell the cheese? My message to conclude is things constantly change, so we must learn to adapt. The faster we adapt to change, the more satisfied and successful we will be. Let us do our best to anticipate external influences by adopting open innovation strategies and foresight. Let us all work to create a better future. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Sandra, for a very interesting presentation. As you know, I am a big fan of foresight in particular, and also open innovation. And Who Moved My Cheese is a story that I also like to use in my lectures, but I take it more from an entrepreneurship perspective. So there's a lot of interesting lessons in that story. I'm conscious of time. There isn't as much time as we hoped for Q&A, but Christina, can I hand over to you to ask our participants if anybody has any questions to ask?
Hi, everyone. Feel free to type in questions in the Q&A and I'll either read them out loud, or you can put your hands up and we'll unmute you and you can also questions. I believe Dr. Dutton's in a slight rush, so if anyone has any specific questions for her to begin with, it would be best to kind of ask those questions now.
I see a question in the chat, a request for Dr. Dutton's presentation, and I believe that, yes, she said she'll be happy to share. Christina, there is a question in the Q&A box for you to ask, please.
Okay, so we have a question. I'm just going to read it out loud. So while what is known within academia is very relevant as background platform to our analysis, business needs to make decisions for tomorrow and beyond. Changes are happening which are new and with no past track record. How can we manage this?
I can make maybe a brief point from my end. I think Sandra can also probably offer a lot from her foresight presentation as well. Definitely, there is most things that happen from a day-to-day basis within businesses rarely have something to fall back upon as an example. I mean, usually you can say we've been through change before, but nothing is really the same over and over. There's hardly a recipe. So I appreciate what this attendee is saying, and I think you're always being faced with something which is rather new. If not new, it's new for that moment in time, new for that year, or new for that quarter, for example. So in reality, I think, leading on from what Sandra was saying, you always have to be prepared kind of for things which are unexpected and which you cannot really have a recipe for. I would say that it needs to be met with a degree of flexibility. So from a personal point of view, we do need to kind of work on those parts of ourselves that make us comfortable with change, in the sense that maybe rather than dwelling around in a corner and panic and cry, maybe you do that for a few seconds and then kind of, think a little bit about what the situation is. Do go back to, to the drawing board, think where things are, think of who you need to communicate with, plan, strategize, spend that amount of time to really think it through. Are you reacting in urgency? Is this a panic, or in reality could this be beneficial for you? Are there any opportunities to be taken from the situation? I think all of our three presentations could kind of come in. So I would say that when you're met from a business point of view with something which has just happened, or there's a change that you need to do, which is unprecedented, I like to think of the SWOT, for example. So where are we as a business? What are our strengths and weaknesses vis-a-vis that change? What opportunities could come from it? What threats? And then I'd like to think, okay, so this is happening, right? I mean, we can't avoid it. So let's face it, let's be realistic, like Sandra was saying, useless crying because the cheese might no longer be there. Let's start seeing where we can move to as a business and address it. And then finally, think about your business and where it can be, and even every difficult decision can be an opportunity. I will end with this. I always say that when a manager comes to me and says, listen, someone is resigning and they are panicking and fretting because this was a really great employee, I always say, look, ultimately there is a talent pool out there. We can try to keep this employee, but you can also try to think whether you can recruit someone different, someone with different skills that you need right now. So everything can be an opportunity. It's just the mindset that you have to tackle that change. So, but I would be interested to hear what Sandra might have to say from a foresight point of view.
Yes, I agree with Elaine very much. And I'm sorry if I came across as being too academic. I also have over 20 years working in private organizations in quite a diversity of industries. Foresight, I think, is the solution to what you are asking. If organizations adopt foresight and conduct a serious foresight activity, they would probably go into a lot more detail than I did, because what I gave is an overview due to time limitations. But a serious foresight activity, which is done in more depth, would also involve identifying other aspects, which include weak signals, wild cards. There's trend analysis, which can be based on demographics. Weak signals, for example, some people have now come up with a video which Bill Gates had given as a TED talk some years ago, which seemed to be a weak signal of the current pandemic. Anybody with their eyes and ears open would have recognized that weak signal and possibly acted on it. Trends generally use demographic data, but one has to be a bit careful over there for the simple reason that, as you are saying, changes can happen which are new. And that is when you bring in what we call in foresight wild cards. What are wild cards? The pandemic is one wild card, a tsunami, an earthquake, terrorist attacks, financial crisis, anything really extraordinary that creates change that, so in a general way, was quite unexpected. How do you deal with wild cards? When working through a foresight activity, one also has to strategize and say, okay, what would we do if there were to be, God forbid, a terrorist attack? What would we do if there were to be an earthquake, a tsunami, a pandemic? Choose whichever wild card you want, but bring it into the whole process. And that would also help you to create a strategy for a fallback position, which is also important. I hope that addresses to some extent your question.
Thanks. If I may just add a few words without going on for too long. I kept back from answering the question immediately because I saw that whoever was asking it was specifically asking for a non-academic response. Therefore, I assumed that it was directed at Elaine. However, like Sandra, although we are based in academia and we conduct a great deal of academic research, we also try to make sure that there is a practical relevance and practical application to the research that we carry out, which we call the double hurdle. So theoretical relevance, but also practical relevance as well. And from my perspective, the answer to your question would be learning how to be creative, learning creative thinking skills and developing the entrepreneurial mindset. Because once you become more fluent in creative thought, then it's much easier to, for example, identify, recognize connections, okay? So joining the dots between seemingly unrelated problems and events. So even though a particular problem might appear to be completely new and completely different, if you have practiced sufficiently with creative thinking tools and worked on building intuition, then it becomes easier to actually identify and link certain patterns of past behavior, which might also be appropriate for future, present and future problems, but then use creative thinking approaches to give it that novel twist, that original solution. So I will stop here. I don't know if there are any additional questions. Elaine, was that you trying to?
I just wanted to thank everyone, and I hope that there will be more events that I can be part of, and thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you for joining us.
Unfortunately.
It was a pleasure, as always. So I think on this note, we can invite the CEO of the Malta Business Bureau, Mr. Joe Tanti, to deliver his brief closing address. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you very much. Okay, am I being heard? Okay, so thank you very much, Leonie. I recognize that I'm between you and lunch, so I promise to be short. To make things matters worse, Professor Dingley's presentation was mentioning cheese a lot, so I need to really be quick. So thank you very much. First of all, Leonie, allow me, like yourself, to thank the excellent presentations earlier on by Dr. Elaine Dutton and obviously by Professor Sandra Dingley. So it was a pleasure for me. I am a business representative, so it was interesting for me to sit here and listen through their journey of the presentation. And if so it was very interesting to hear about the change, which is and all the challenges and opportunities that this present world is bringing to us. And if I can add up a couple of words to that, something which I have learned myself throughout the past months more than ever, you know, it gives you an opportunity also to sit back and meditate and also look what else we could do better. And if I could add up an African proverb to the fact that if you want to walk fast, walk alone. If you want to walk far, walk together. And you know, I looked at this proverb from an experience which I had the pleasure to share with 3 young entrepreneurs who came together during COVID times. You know, they are tech companies, and you know, they came together to look into how to collaborate together and look into exploiting better opportunities. There was a company in cloud services, the other one was in software, and the other one was in cybersecurity. So it was interesting, these companies collaborating to not only face the challenges that was brought about by COVID itself, but also to grab future opportunities. As I promised, I won't be long, but I want to take this opportunity, first of all, Leonie, to commend you and your team. Also, this activity was part of the Global Entrepreneurship Week, which for participants who don't know much about that, is mainly an event which is designed to connect aspiring and inspiring entrepreneurs together. So you managed, and I managed to follow a couple of your activities to put together such an excellent program of events to join this global celebration of entrepreneurship. So well done for that. Well done to you and your team. We were talking about collaboration, and as you know, we are collaborating with the academic experts, but not also with the academic experts, people who walk the talk, like yourself, Elaine, and Sandra also, and in your presentations, you are making reference to that. So, Leonie, as an organization ourselves that has the interest of the business community at heart, it is important for us to contribute also to initiatives like this one that support the education and training of our entrepreneurs. So thank you also for collaborating with us on DIFMA. We have Marika here, who is our leader in terms of these projects, which I heartily thank her for her drive. And also we have our project partners, who most of them had the opportunity to join us, including our brand ambassadors, who I thank them not only for collaborating, but also for promoting today's event. One final announcement from my end. So I again thank above the speakers today again and all the participants who joined us. But also I have an announcement for those who are participating today and would like to take part of this piloting exercise. To make up this opportunity, our piloting is done online, so it's easier for our entrepreneurs, and we encourage you to participate because we can only learn if we get your feedback. We are here to improve on our product and the service, so it will be thanks to you if we manage to do that. So please send us an email on info@difma.eu, info@difma.eu, for us, for Marika, to pass on the username and password so you can feed us with your input. And with that, I stop here. As I promised, lunch is knocking and the floor is yours, Naomi. Thank you.
No, thank you, Joe. I don't think we have anything further to say, except we look forward to roping in the participation of all of our attendees in the DIFMA project through the piloting and eventually the use and the dissemination of the modules. If you do start to look at them now, bear in mind that it's still work in progress, so they're still being fine-tuned. But we still have several months to go to polish them up, and at the end of the project, they will be ready to properly launch. But thanks, everyone, and have a great afternoon.
Very good. Thank you. Bye.